You've probably seen them. Cards with strange imagery, swords, skeletons, a crowned figure tumbling from a crumbling tower. There's one with a horned creature sitting on a throne, and another called the Hanged Man. Dramatic, right? Some people swear by them. Others won't even touch them. To some, tarot cards are just a fun little curiosity, maybe a conversation starter at a party or something to spice up a girl's night in. But to others, they're dangerous, evil, a gateway to the dark arts. So, where does that come from? Are tarot cards really evil? Hey you, welcome back to Black Chapter. Today we're diving into one of the most misunderstood spiritual tools of all time. It's a story full of Renaissance intrigue, occult movements, religious fear, pop culture panic, and good old-fashioned misinformation. Because the truth about tarot is weirder and more interesting than you might think. We'll walk through how tarot started as a game. Literally, like Uno but with extra steps. Then we'll get into the occult revival of the 19th century, when tarot was suddenly swept up into mysticism, magic, and secret societies. From there, things only got spookier, thanks to Hollywood, satanic panics, and some very dramatic interpretations of a deck that never asked to be controversial. And hey, we're not here to sell you on tarot. If it's not your thing, that's fine. But if you've ever side-eyed those cards and thought, that's probably some kind of witchcraft, this one's for you. Let's clear there. Because the truth, it's not evil. But it is complicated. So light a candle, shuffle up your curiosity, and let's talk about tarot. To understand why people think tarot is evil, we need to go back. Like way back. Not to witches in the woods or secret cults, nope. We're talking about northern Italy in the early 15th century. Back then, tarot wasn't spiritual at all. It was a card game. Straight up. The earliest known tarot cards were part of a game called tarocchi. And if that sounds kind of fancy, that's because it was. These decks were custom-made for the nobility. We're talking hand-painted, gold leaf, bougie Renaissance luxury. The most famous early tarot deck, the Visconti Sforza deck, created around 1440 for the Duke of Milan. And this thing is gorgeous. The cards feature kings, knights, celestial figures, and a whole lot of symbolism, but not for fortune-telling. It was more like a combination of modern bridge and a trick-taking game. Notations, not a spiritual ritual, just cards. Back then, tarot had 4 suits, just like modern cards, but also included triumph cards. These are kind of like special trump cards that evolved into what we now call the major arcana. The names: Justice, Temperance, the Pope, the Empress. Sound familiar? Now, some of the imagery did have religious or moral themes. But that's just because, Renaissance Italy was deeply Catholic. Symbolism was everywhere. Art, architecture, literature. It all leaned heavily on religious and classical iconography. The tarot just fit into that world. For a couple centuries, tarot remained a game. There's no evidence, zero, that it was used for divination until much later. Like 18th century later. So when did tarot start getting mystical? That's what we'll explore next. But first, remember this. The original purpose of tarot was more about strategy than spirituality. It wasn't evil. It wasn't even magical. It was just a flex, something to show off wealth, taste, and maybe win a few rounds at court. So we got tarot cards hanging out in the palaces and parlor rooms of 15th century Italy. No spells, no summoning, just rich folks having fun. Fast forward a few hundred years, and the world starts to look a little different. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Europe was experiencing a major cultural shift. People were beginning to question traditional religion. Science was on the rise, but so was something else: mysticism. Enter the occult revival. This was a period when spiritualism, alchemy, and esoteric philosophy exploded in popularity, especially among the upper and middle classes. Secret societies were all the rage. People were obsessed with unlocking hidden knowledge, decoding ancient wisdom, and peeking behind the curtain of the material world. And it's right here that tarot starts to morph. The earliest known use of tarot for divination comes from around 1750, when a French author named Jean-Baptiste Alliette, or as he styled himself, Attila, published a guide on using tarot for fortune-telling. He wasn't a mystic in the traditional sense, he was more of a self-styled expert who saw an opportunity. He connected tarot to ancient Egyptian knowledge, even though there's zero historical link, and claimed the cards held secrets to the universe. From there, tarot's spiritual rep only grew. In the mid-19th century, a French magician and philosopher named Eliphas Levi added serious fuel to the mystical fire. He believed the tarot was a key to divine knowledge, full of Kabbalistic and Hermetic symbols. He even linked the 22 major arcana cards to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, a bold move with no historical basis, but it caught on. Levi's writings deeply influenced the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a secret society founded in 1888 in London. The Golden Dawn was a big deal. Its members included poets, intellectuals, and even famous occultists like Aleister Crowley. They saw tarot as a spiritual tool, a means to access higher consciousness, map the self, and explore divine truths. And from that movement came something you've probably seen, the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. Published in 1909, this deck was designed by Arthur Edward Waite, a Golden Dawn member, and illustrated by Pamela Coleman Smith. It was the first tarot deck to include rich, symbolic illustrations on all 78 cards, not just the major arcana. Smith's artwork brought tarot to life in a whole new way. Her imagery was full of symbolism, spiritual references, and subtle cues that helped readers unlock deeper interpretations. Today, the Rider-Waite deck is the most recognized tarot set in the world. If you've ever seen a deck in pop culture, chances are it's based on this one. So by the early 20th century, tarot had completed its transformation from a Renaissance pastime to a powerful spiritual tool. But the real question is, when did people start thinking that was dangerous? That's what we'll get into next. Now that tarot was being used for spiritual insight, it started to attract the kind of attention you probably expected from the beginning: religious pushback. Let's rewind a bit. For centuries, the Christian church had a complicated relationship with anything that smelled even a little mystical. Divination, astrology, mediumship, all considered off-limits. The Bible explicitly condemns soothsayers and sorcerers. So when tarot made its leap from card game to mystical tool, it quickly got lumped in with what the church called divinatio diaboli, divination of the devil. The problem was that the symbolism in tarot decks looked occult. You had cards like the devil, the hangman, and death, right? Combine that with the rise of secret societies like the Golden Dawn, and it was easy to paint tarot as a tool of dark magic. By the late 19th century and into the early 20th, this suspicion snowballed, especially in the United States. As spiritualism and occult practices gained popularity, so did fear-based reactions. Some religious groups began publishing pamphlets warning of the dangers of the occult, including tarot. The cards were called doorways to demonic influence, and tarot readers were sometimes treated like criminals or con artists. But things got really intense in the 1980s. This is when we entered what's now known as the Satanic Panic, a moral hysteria that swept through the US and parts of Europe. It was fueled by sensational media reports, tabloid journalism, and fear that satanic cults were hiding in plain sight, brainwashing kids, infiltrating schools, and using tools like heavy metal music and, yes, tarot cards. During this time, tarot became a favorite scapegoat for everything from teenage rebellion to mental illness. Parents were warned to look out for tarot decks as signs their kids might be dabbling in Satanism. Police departments were even trained to recognize occult symbols, including ones found in completely harmless tarot decks. Tarot readers, many of whom had small businesses or worked in metaphysical shops, were accused of being frauds or worse, agents of evil. Some faced threats, vandalism, or were shut down entirely due to public pressure. To be clear, there was never any widespread evidence of organized occult crime connected to tarot. But fear doesn't need evidence. It just needs a symbol, and the tarot deck, with its haunting art and mysterious names, made an easy target. These fears weren't just religious. There was also a political undercurrent. As New Age spirituality began to flourish, it often clashed with conservative values. Tarot, astrology, crystals, anything outside traditional religion was seen as a threat to the moral order. And in many ways, that shadow still lingers today. Some Christian denominations still officially warn against tarot. There are communities, especially in more conservative areas, where having a deck of cards can make you a social outcast. And every now and then, you'll still see sensational headlines about occult tools being found at crime scenes or schools. It's important to remember that this isn't unique to tarot. Cultural and spiritual practices outside the mainstream have always faced suspicion. But tarot's blend of dramatic visuals, Ancient mystique and rising popularity made it a perfect storm. The question is, if tarot has been demonized so aggressively, how did it survive? Next, we look at how pop culture kept the myth alive, and in some cases made it worse. Let's be honest, when most people think of tarot, they don't picture Italian nobles playing cards. They picture a shadowy figure flipping over a card in a horror movie, followed by a dramatic gasp. The death card? Yeah, that scene. Pop culture hasn't just reflected fears about tarot, it's amplified them. Over and over again. Let's rewind to the early 20th century. Tarot had already become associated with spiritualism and the occult, but its public image was still niche. That all changed with film, television, and later mass-market fiction. One of the earliest films to feature tarot was The Thief of Baghdad in 1924. The cards weren't shown as evil, just mysterious. But by the time we hit the 1960s and 70s, during a period of deep interest in the occult and paranormal, tarot became a cinematic shorthand for doom. Movies like Live and Let Die, 1973, featured sultry, mystical women using tarot to predict death and betrayal. The Rider-Waite deck got a massive visibility boost from that film, but so did the idea that tarot was about danger, fate, death. Throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, horror films couldn't resist throwing in a tarot scene. The formula was simple: someone draws a card, it's something like the Tower or Death, and then bam, something terrible happens. Never mind that death in tarot rarely means literal death. In pop culture, it became the omen. TV shows weren't much better. Even family-friendly series would often portray tarot readers as shady, eerie, or flat-out fraudulent. You'd see a woman with a headscarf in a dimly lit room, whispering cryptic warnings while ominous music played in the background. It was theatrical, but also misleading. And then there's the fiction world. Novels across genres have used tarot as plot devices, often with apocalyptic stakes. In many of these stories, the cards themselves are treated almost like cursed objects, capable of changing fate or inviting evil. This image was burned so deeply into public consciousness that even non-supernatural genres adopted it. From crime dramas to romantic thrillers, if you wanted to inject a little tension or mystery, all you had to do was throw in a tarot reading. Now, let's be fair, pop culture didn't invent the association between tarot and the occult, but it exaggerated it to the point where fiction started to feel like fact. And the consequences? Real tarot readers, who were mostly just regular people using the cards for meditation, storytelling, or counseling, were viewed with suspicion. Thanks to movies and TV, people started to believe that every tarot reading predicted tragedy, and that readers were either gifted mystics or sinister manipulators. What's wild is that this kind of portrayal didn't just affect public perception. It shaped the way new readers approached tarot. Some leaned into the spooky aesthetic because, well, it sold. Others tried to reclaim the image, pushing back against the drama and recentering tarot as a tool for empowerment or introspection. By the 2000s, the narrative began to shift again. With the rise of social media, especially YouTube and Instagram, a new generation of tarot practitioners emerged. Ones who were less about theatrics and more about clarity, psychology, and personal growth. But even now, those old Hollywood-style images still linger. Every time a new horror film uses tarot as a creepy plot twist, it reinforces a myth that's been around for decades. And that myth? That tarot is dangerous, ominous, or inherently linked to evil. It's fiction. But fiction has power. In the next chapter, we'll pull back the curtain and explore what tarot really means, how it's actually used, and why it's nothing like what you've seen in the movies. By now, we've looked at tarot's transformation, from a Renaissance card game to a scapegoat for spiritual panic. But strip away all the fear, mythology, and movie drama, and you're left with the real question: what does tarot actually do? Let's start with the structure. A standard tarot deck has 78 cards. These are divided into two main sections: the major arcana and the minor arcana. The major arcana, 22 cards like the Fool, the Magician, Strength, Justice, and the World, represent big picture themes. Think of them as the major turning points in a story, moments of transformation, crisis, or realization. They're archetypal, symbolic. They speak to experiences we all have: growth, failure, love, endings, new beginnings. Then there's the minor arcana, made up of 56 cards divided into 4 suits: cups, pentacles, wands, and swords. Each suit corresponds to a different aspect of life: Cups deal with emotions and relationships. Pentacles focus on work, money, and physical reality. Wands symbolize creativity, passion, and energy. Swords represent thoughts, conflict, and intellect. Each suit has 10 numbered cards and 4 court cards: page, knight, queen, and king. These often represent people or personality types, but can also point to energies or situations. So when someone reads tarot, they're interpreting combinations of these symbols, not predicting the future with some kind of cosmic hotline. Most tarot readers don't claim to have supernatural powers. Instead, they use the cards as a reflective tool, like a mirror that helps people see their lives from a new angle. A reading might explore a relationship dynamic, a tough decision, or an emotional block. The cards provide metaphors. The reader helps interpret them. This brings us to a key concept. Tarot is narrative-driven. It tells stories. Pull 3 cards, say the Lovers, the Tower, and the Star, and you've got a mini narrative. Maybe a relationship went through upheaval, but now there's hope on the horizon. That's not magic, it's metaphor. And humans are wired for metaphor. We understand our lives better when we frame them as stories. There's also a growing community of psychologically informed readers who incorporate Jungian concepts like archetypes and the collective unconscious into their practice. They don't see the cards as mystical messages, but as prompts that help people tap into their intuition or subconscious thoughts. Others approach tarot from a therapeutic perspective, using it to facilitate journaling, self-reflection, or even trauma processing. Some licensed therapists even use tarot-like tools, non-predictively, as part of guided visualization. And then there are people who treat it more like a ritual, lighting a candle, drawing a card each morning to set intentions, or using the cards during moon phases or life transitions. Again, not evil, not predictive, but deeply personal. Importantly, tarot isn't a monolith. People use it in different ways. And yes, some do believe the cards are spiritually charged, or that they can tap into intuitive or psychic insight. But even among those who take a more metaphysical approach, the goal is almost always empowerment, not fear. So why do people still think it's dangerous? Because words like the devil or the hanged man make people nervous. But context is everything. Take the devil card. It's not about Satan. It's about bondage, addiction, unhealthy attachments. It shows a couple chained to a pedestal, but if you look closely, the chains are loose. They could leave any time. It's a card about recognizing what's holding you back. Or death. It rarely means actual death. More often, it signals transformation, an ending that leads to a new beginning. It's the closing of one chapter so another can begin. Kinda poetic, really. Even the Tower, arguably the most feared card, isn't about damnation. It's about upheaval. Crisis. The breaking down of false structures. Painful, yes, but sometimes necessary. When you strip away the fear, what you're left with is a language of images. Tarot is symbolic communication. It's a tool, a mirror, not a portal. And as we've seen, much of the fear comes not from what tarot is, but what people think it is. In the next chapter, we'll tackle those fears directly. Why do some still insist tarot is evil? What role do ethics and responsibility play in how it's used today? And what does it say about us, our culture, our fears, our desire for certainty? So if tarot is mostly about reflection, metaphor, and self-inquiry, why do some people still consider it evil? The answer, honestly, depends on who you ask. For many religious groups, especially within conservative Christianity, the resistance to tarot stems from Scripture. The Bible contains several passages condemning divination, necromancy, and sorcery. Even if tarot today isn't used for fortune-telling in most circles, it still gets filed under occult practices by default. This isn't just about interpretation. It's about fear of influence. Parents, pastors, and even some educators worry that tarot opens the door to spiritual confusion. They see it as a slippery slope, one that leads young people away from tradition and into dangerous territory. And let's be real, with tarot's association to astrology, crystals, and other witchy aesthetics, it's often seen as part of a larger trend that challenges orthodox belief systems. There's also the matter of visibility. Tarot is everywhere now. You can find decks in bookstores, apps on your phone, and walkthroughs on TikTok or YouTube. That surge in popularity makes it harder to ignore and easier to criticize. For some, tarot represents rebellion. It's an alternative way of thinking, of knowing, of being. And in societies where spiritual authority has traditionally been centralized, churches, temples, institutions, that independence can feel threatening. But not everyone who's suspicious of tarot is coming from a religious perspective. Some critics argue that tarot can be exploitative, that unethical readers prey on people in vulnerable emotional states, promising insight they can't deliver. And yeah, there's some truth there. Just like in any industry, there are people who take advantage. But the tarot community has also responded. Many readers now include disclaimers. They clarify they're not providing legal, medical, or financial advice. Others make it clear they're not predicting the future, they're offering perspective, helping clients think more clearly. There's a growing emphasis on ethical practice. Consent, transparency, trauma awareness, these are becoming core values in modern tarot spaces. And that shift is important. Because tools like tarot can be helpful, but they shouldn't replace professional help when it's needed. The best readers know that. They respect the boundaries. So we circle back to the question, is tarot evil? It's not. But it can be misunderstood. And it can be misused like any tool. A knife can prepare a meal or cause harm. A story can inspire or deceive. Tarot is just a language, a deck of cards with layered meanings. What matters is how it's used and why. And maybe the bigger issue isn't tarot itself, but the fear of what it represents. Uncertainty, intuition, change, the unknown. For some, that's terrifying. For others, that's freedom. So, after all this, what is tarot really? It's not a cursed object. It's not a portal to the underworld. It's not a guarantee of anything, good or bad. At its core, tarot is a storytelling tool, a symbolic language, a deck of images that reflect human experience, love, conflict, change, doubt, hope, transformation. And sure, over the centuries, it's picked up layers of meaning, mysticism, and cultural baggage. From Renaissance games to occult philosophy, to Hollywood horror, to TikTok tutorials, tarot has lived 1,000 lives, each one shaped by the people who used it, feared it, banned it, or embraced it. The idea that tarot is evil isn't about the cards. It's about us. It's about how we respond to the unknown, how we deal with uncertainty, how we explain what we can't control, and sometimes how we hold on to systems of belief that make us feel safe by casting out the ones that don't. Tarot's not asking you to believe in magic. It's asking you to listen, to look, to reflect. If that feels uncomfortable, that's okay. Discomfort can be honest. It can also be an invitation. Today, tarot lives at a strange crossroads, used by therapists and witches, skeptics and spiritualists, artists and analysts. It's found in dorm rooms, corporate retreats, bookshops, and places of worship. It belongs to no one and to everyone. The question isn't whether it's evil. The question is, what does it show you? Because ultimately, tarot is a mirror. And sometimes the hardest thing to face is ourselves. So what do you think of today's video? Do you have something you want us to feature next? Tell us in the comments. It will also mean a lot to us if you like and subscribe. Say our tagline. Close the book if you can. This is Black Chapter.